All right, buckle up because we are diving deep into JD Vance's town hall.
Reading Pennsylvania.
Yeah, Reading, Pennsylvania.
Yeah.
We're talking election season, and you guys wanted to know what he's saying, so we're going deep.
Absolutely.
This is a true town hall vibe. Like,
Yeah.
his team is saying he had no idea what questions were coming.
Right.
So this is really him off the cuff.
Yeah.
So, what were your kind of big takeaways? Like, what jumped out at you?
I think right out of the gate, the first question really tees up this whole theme that he hits on over and over again, which is, the American dream and specifically homeownership.
Right.
And he really focuses on how that feels out of reach for so many Americans right now.
Yeah, and like the first question is this young guy, Michael, he's like, how can I even afford a home? This feels impossible.
Absolutely.
Like, that's real.
It's real. And Vance, he doesn't shy away from it. I mean,
Yeah.
he immediately connects it to, inflation under the Biden administration, illegal immigration. He even throws out this statistic, I think with 55% increase in home prices in Pennsylvania just in the last 3.5 years.
Oh, wow, yeah. And that's going to resonate, especially with younger voters.
Absolutely. And he also, I noticed, like throughout this whole exchange, he kind of keeps circling back to Kamala Harris.
Oh, interesting.
And he's creating this contrast between, her past promises about affordable housing and then the reality that he's presenting.
It's like, remember those promises.
Yes.
I need to. Okay, so we're seeing like a pattern here. Tap into anxieties, tie it to current administration,
Yeah.
and then present themselves, Trump and Vance, as the solution.
Exactly. Yeah. And it's not just about having a solution, but it's about action, and he does that throughout the whole town hall. He uses these very specific anecdotes and examples, and this is especially apparent when the question about election integrity comes up. I mean, that's obviously top of mind for voters these days.
For sure.
Even Sade Steele, who's moderating, she brings up her own experience with, trying to register to vote in Florida.
Right.
And she calls out Broward County specifically.
Interesting.
And she's basically like, this is a real concern, even for her.
Right.
Here's where I thought it was interesting, is instead of just dwelling on the potential problems, he uses it as a launching pad to then be like, okay, here's what we need to do. Check your registration, volunteer as a poll watcher. He even directs people to this website.
What was it?
swampthevoteusa.com.
Okay.
So he's turning that concern into action.
Okay, so switching gears a bit, China.
Yes.
I mean, he does not hold back.
Well,
He's basically painting this picture of China as both an economic rival and like a threat to American values.
yeah. And he uses this question about shipbuilding to really drive this point home. He says that the U.S. share of global shipbuilding has plummeted from, get this, 5% to 0.2% since the 1970s.
Wow.
It's a crazy statistic.
And who's taken all that? China.
Exactly. And he connects that directly to national security. He says, if we have this weaker manufacturing base, it puts the U.S. at a disadvantage in a potential conflict. And he goes on to say that, the U.S. is playing with a handicap because, and I quote this directly, he says the Chinese are willing to use slave labor, and we are not.
Strong words.
Yeah. And it allows him to kind of frame this issue in these stark moral terms. So, for example, when he talks about Kamala Harris's opposition to tariffs, he's presenting it not just as a policy disagreement, but as, quote, anti-American.
Wow. So he's basically saying, like, you are siding with this system that is exploiting workers. Okay, so we've got economic anxieties, we've got election integrity, we've got China. Like, is there a through line here? Is there a common thread in all of this?
There is. It all comes back to values.
Okay.
He is weaving this narrative where he's saying American values are under attack.
Okay.
Both from, within it and then also externally, like from China.
And to combat those threats, you need a strong leader, someone who embodies those values. Is that kind of what he's getting at?
Exactly.
Yeah.
And he goes on to say that a lot of Americans just aren't worried enough about socialism because they don't even really understand it.
And why is that? What's his take?
He puts the blame really directly on the education system,
Okay.
saying that they're, more concerned with this progressive agenda than actually teaching kids, like, the basics.
Yeah.
He uses that line like 87 genders but can't add.
Oh, yeah.
Which,
Whether you agree with it or not, you got to admit that's a soundbite. That sticks.
absolutely. It's about those memorable moments. But he cleverly brings it all back around to the American dream.
Okay.
He's saying, strong education, that's crucial for upward mobility.
So without it, you're kind of screwed.
Right.
Like you're saying, the American dream is just not really achievable.
Right. And that resonates with people, especially those who are feeling, left behind.
Okay. So last question from this town hall. How do we tackle this government overreach, particularly with, agencies like the DOJ and the FBI? And this feels like super relevant given everything that's been in the news lately,
Totally. And his message here is all about equal justice under the law.
which he's suggesting we're not seeing right now.
Right. He uses examples like that pro-life father who was
Yeah.
prosecuted,
Right.
the FBI getting involved in like school board disputes. He's really playing into those anxieties about kind of, this two-tiered justice system.
And this is where we get a little of that Vance humor, where he jokes about Trump loving to say, "You're fired."
Yeah.
And he even says, we should have a TV show about cleaning house in D.C.
Oh, totally. Classic dad.
So good.
It's funny. It's unexpected.
Yeah.
But it also kind of subtly reinforces this idea of action and accountability.
Like, we're not just going to talk about these problems, we're going to fix them.
Exactly. And he's drawing this parallel between, parenting, where you have to discipline your kids when they mess up, and governing.
Yeah.
If you want a well-functioning government, you have to hold people accountable.
Right. Fire them if you have to.
Exactly.
Okay. So, to sum it up, we've got Vance weaving together these themes of economic anxiety, kind of this erosion of traditional values, the government overreach, this sense that the American dream is slipping away, and his solution, a return to this strong, decisive leadership
Yes.
embodied by Trump.
Yeah, he is speaking directly to a very specific group of voters, those who feel like they've been left behind, forgotten.
The forgotten man.
Exactly. Those who maybe feel ignored by the current administration.
He's saying, I see you, I hear you.
Yes.
And I'm here to fight.
Absolutely. And it's a very powerful message, especially for voters who maybe are feeling disillusioned or, just left out of the process.
Okay, before we get to our final thoughts, anything else stand out to you from this town hall? Like, were there any moments you thought were particularly effective or maybe even fell flat?
What really struck me was when Sage Steele brings up the debate and that question about Vance's past criticisms of Trump.
Ooh.
It could have been a really awkward moment for him.
Yeah. I thought he was going to dodge it.
But he owns it.
He does. He totally owns it.
He leans in. He's like, yeah, you know what? I was wrong about the guy. And honestly,
Yeah.
almost refreshing to hear a politician admit they were wrong these days.
It's true. It makes him seem more human,
Yeah,
more relatable.
exactly. It kind of disarms that potential criticism and it lets him control the narrative. He's saying, it's okay to change your mind. I did it and I'm better for it.
And it almost invites voters to do the same. Like, if he can change his mind about Trump, maybe I can too.
Right. It's a powerful message, especially in this political climate where everything feels so divided.
Okay, so we've unpacked his messages, his strategies, his target audience, how he connects with voters on this emotional level using these relatable stories. What's your final thought for our listener? What's the one big takeaway they should hold on to from this deep dive?
So much to think about. You've given us a lot to unpack. What really stuck with me was that story he tells at the very end about this woman who prayed for him and his family.
Oh, yeah.
Even though, she was struggling to put food on the table.
Right. Powerful moment.
I mean, it could have ended with a policy point or something.
Absolutely.
He chose this really personal story.
It was smart. I mean, it really tugs at your heartstrings, It
Yeah.
reminds you of the human cost of all this political back and forth.
Exactly. And it goes back to that idea of who he's fighting for.
Yeah.
These families that are struggling, these everyday Americans.
Exactly. And then he hits us with that excerpt from the cadet prayer.
Oh, man.
Chills.
His dad made him memorize it.
Choose the harder right instead of the easier wrong. And never be content with a half-truth when the whole can be one.
I mean, talk about a mission statement.
Right.
It gets to the heart of his message.
Yeah.
America needs to make tough choices.
Right.
And he's saying he's the guy to make them.
He's selling strength, courage, conviction, this willingness to do what he thinks is right, even when it's hard.
Exactly.
You're-
Whether you agree with him or not, you have to admit it's a powerful message.
It really is. Well, we've covered a lot of ground in this deep dive, folks. We broke down Vance's key messages. We analyzed his strategies. We even got a little personal there for a minute.
It's all connected, right?
It is. It all ties together. And you know what? I think it all comes down to storytelling.
Oh, for sure.
He's a good storyteller.
He is. He knows how to connect with people on an emotional level. And that's huge in politics. People remember stories.
They do. And those stories can be really persuasive.
Absolutely.
So as we wrap up this deep dive, remember, It's not about agreeing with everything you hear.
Right.
It's about being informed. It's about understanding the different perspectives.
Exactly. Being an engaged citizen, thinking critically about the information that's coming at you.
Couldn't have said it better myself.
Well said.
Thanks for taking this deep dive with us, everyone.
Until next time.
Stay curious and keep asking those tough questions.